Everybody, welcome to another episode of the Girlfriend Hour. I'm very excited today. We have the wonderful, extravagant Sam Baltrusis. Baltrusis, how do you pronounce that?
It's Baltrusis.
Baltrusis. So Sam is, I mean, you wear many hats. You're an author, you are a lecturer, you have done eight, I think, national TV shows.
Yeah,
Um,
so I was just looking at my list. It's more than that, but so there's television shows and I've done documentaries as well. So I would say around 12.
Yeah, I mean, just going through all of the stuff that you've done, I'm like, I'm gonna have to get the total amount from him because you are a man of many, many different tricks and trades, and you wear a lot of hats. So I'm very impressed. So I guess on that note, I'm gonna pass the torch to you and kind of let you fill us in on what you've been up to.
So I'm an author. I've written 16 books altogether. I just had my latest book called Fueled by Fear, which is number 16, come out, and so excited about that. I've also I just been super busy the past couple of days. I did what I call Spirit Squad weekend, where I work with a group of up and coming mediums, and we gather together at a place called Edgewood Manor Inn in Providence, Rhode Island, and it was beautiful. We had workshops, we had different things that we discussed in regards to fine tuning their clairs, which is being able to tap into the spirit realm. So very beautiful weekend. I was able to go back to a location that both terrifies me and has a part of my history, which is the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast. And I did talk about that on social media, but going back there after filming this show called Curse of Lizzie Borden, this is the first time. So kind of still recovering from that, but yeah, super busy. Always have a new project that I'm working on and hopefully passing it on to the younger generation, which is what Spirit Squad is all about.
Awesome. Yeah, it was funny because I wanted to talk. There's so much I want to talk about. My brain, I think like my ADD brain is just exploding with like, okay, I want to go here, I want to go here. But I had just recently saw that you had gone back to Lizzie Borden on your Instagram. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I have to hear about this first incident and kind of what took place. If you're able to share that, I wasn't sure if that was something maybe you were writing on or working on, but if you're able to share it with our listeners, kind of maybe touch upon that experience and what kind of happened.
Yeah, so it's more about the history for me. So it's going to give you some this is a really long story, but for about 12 years, I have gone to the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast. So there were previous owners, Leanne Wilbur, who was amazing, has worked with me. I had recurring nightmares of the house and of the murders for most of my life. So when I say the nightmares were, I would walk into a house in my dream. I would see what looks like a woman holding a hatchet, standing behind a couch while a man was sitting on the couch. It was black and white, and it would say "Diablo did it" as a meaning that the murders that happened in 1892 actually was something else other than the woman holding the hatchet. This is I have followed the case, but not necessarily. I specialize in the Salem witch trials, so I really didn't know too much about the case. But so it took me years to actually walk inside the house, and this was in 2012. And then I started kind of becoming more comfortable with the location because I do feel I identify as clairvoyant now, but at the time I was super sensitive to the energies in the house, but not realizing that I'm actually related to the Borden family. And yeah,
Oh,
yeah, not once but twice. And this actually was uncovered in 2019. And I feel, so after finding that out, I really, it rocked my world. I wanted to find out more information. I actually, and also really, because my idea of what happened in 1892, so it was August 1892, two horrific murders happened at the murder house in Fall River. And my distant cousin Lizzie Borden, or she likes to be called Lizbeth, actually, was acquitted of murdering her father Andrew Borden and her stepmother Abby Borden. So years and years of investigating the house before I found this out. Once I found that out, things kind of switched for me, and I started connecting really strongly with the energies of the house, as in as a clairvoyant, using different investigative tools like the Estes method, like actually.
That's with the headphones.
Right. So you use noise
Yeah.
cancellation earphones, and you a blindfold, and people ask questions in the room. And we were getting really hardcore responses from using that with groups that would come in. We would actually rent out the bed and breakfast for overnight investigations. My last investigation there was the day before everything shut down during COVID. So this was March 13th, 2020. And I have to say that investigation right before COVID was the most intense investigation I've ever had in the house. And a lot of it went into what I believe was sexual abuse directed towards my distant cousin, Lizzie Borden. So there was I didn't have that before. So that was sort of the beginnings of what became so during COVID, we were stuck inside. So I wasn't able to actually go back to the house. But I did go back for a show called The Curse of Lizzie Borden. And that was a documentary or a shock doc that aired on the Travel Channel and Discovery Plus. And I must add, it just won a Gold Telly Award, which is an international award for excellence for the show. I was on the show with Dave Schrader from the Holzer Files and renowned medium Chris Fleming and Luann Jolly, who was a local investigator. And we were there for almost a week investigating the whole backstory to my family lineage. And, having done all the research, and we actually uncovered that not only am I related to the Borden family, but also related to the Putnams, who were the major accusers in the Salem witch trials, and many more people. So it was a bombshell. And I go in right before I was about to film. I would have visitation dreams where I knew I was about to do something extremely profound. I was connecting. I'm not sure what energy I was connecting with, but it kept warning me about going back to that house. So there was a really intense fear. I got a call from a medium about a week before filming, and she was like, okay, you're about to go film a TV show. You're going to be in a black SUV driving down I-93, which is the road you have to take to get from Boston, where I live, to Fall River. And you're going to be in a fatal car accident. And first of all, if you're a medium, do not ever tell another person that they're going to be in a car accident.
I know that's like the number one rule of like any type of special gifts. Like you don't
do that. I do feel like that there was something attached to it, but I also, so as that I was terrified. So when I was heading to set, I'm like, I'm about to die. And I literally, I get into an Uber. I make sure that the Uber is not a black SUV like she predicted. And what's interesting though is as I pull up in the Uber, Dave Schrader pulls up in a black SUV, and I'm like, oh no.
You're like, jump in my Uber. Get out of the SUV.
So we spent several days and nights at the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, and I will say what uncovered was definitely amplified, because when you get a certain group together, someone like Dave Schrader, who I trust immensely, is an amazing investigator and also has a bit of a sensitivity going on. And to me, Chris Fleming is one of the best mediums in the field, but I had actually never worked with him before. But us together, it was this power cup, like it was a power team. It was just so powerful. And I feel like that we had a lot of emotion because it was in the middle of COVID. I think the spirits in the house were used to being investigated pretty much every night. And so what unfolded was probably the most beautiful, most terrifying couple of days of my life. I leave the property, filming the show, feeling really relieved. The show comes out about 7 months later. And a lot of it, so I came on The Curse Lizzie Borden as a historian and a family member of the Borden family. I wasn't supposed to be kind of presented as a medium. And what happened was I started to channel Eliza Borden, who was a distant relative who actually married into the Borden family. So she wasn't a blood relative, but her children, who she killed 40 years before 1892, were family members. So I have a really intense ties to this case and to the spirits associated with Lizzie Borden, and specifically, the murder house, but also at Maplecroft too. So going back, it's been about 2 years since filming The Curse of Lizzie Borden. I swear I would never go back. And the reason why I had some guilt or some so during the filming, I told my distant cousin I would never ask her if she actually murdered her father and her stepmother, which is probably the question that everybody asks when they go to investigate. And she was just tired of asking, people reaching out to her. And the producers were, like, hey, can you do this? And oddly, it didn't actually end up in the show, but while I was recording, I'm like, Lizzie, did you kill your father and stepmother? I picked up a blood curdling scream that still haunts me. It was just this really painful, like, why are you asking me this? Why are you doing this? Why did you promise me? And so that emotion, there was a lot of guilt. And also after filming, I made a pact. So the previous owner, Leanne Wilbur, a lovely person, actually passed away a few months after we filmed, and we dedicated Curse of Lizzie Borden to Leanne's memory.
Aww.
And so there's a lot to it. It's not just going back to a haunted house. There's a lot of
but I love this. I mean, this is fantastic.
a lot of emotion. So I had my Spirit Squad weekend this past weekend, and we were at a bed and breakfast, which was about 20 minutes away from the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back because I'm with people that I trust. And we go back, and the tour was outside of the property, but we did go inside the house. And being back in, there was a lot of trauma associated with my past in the house. And also the trauma associated with filming Curse of Lizzie Borden. Because I feel like that we were not only dealing with the spirits of the house, but there was something, a darker energy that we were also dealing with too, that I feel, we had to push it to the side basically to get to the spirits of the house. So I was worried about the darker energy, and yes, it's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. And I was afraid of not only for me, but other people that I was with, my students, if they were going to get attacked. So my goal really was to go back to the house and see how I felt. I for the most part, I was unaffected. It wasn't like I was spending the night there, and it was almost like they kind of woke up like, oh, it's Sam. Let's go terrorize Sam. I didn't really get affected until I walked down to the basement, and I basically started getting nauseous, which I never really get nauseous, and I felt like something was stabbing me in my back, in the basement area. And I've always thought that the basement had something else in it, like a darker energy. Not saying it's the D word, but saying that it's something a little bit more sinister that doesn't necessarily belong in the house. And so if you actually watch The Curse of Lizzie Borden, our theory is that there is a darker energy that may have taken over Lizzie, but not only Lizzie, but other people in my family, which is the sort of the curse of the family.
Okay.
So it was just not necessarily afraid of being taken over, but being afraid that someone that I cared about in my group would be attacked. That was more my fear. And we had outside. So I did run out, very nauseous. And we did an apology ritual with our group where we apologize for anything that I may have done that may have been offensive and didn't support the family. And I promised my distant cousin I would never call her back there. And that was the number one thing I told my students. I'm like, do not call Lizzie back to the house. She does not want to go back to the place that was where her father and stepmother were murdered. And she doesn't take accountability, responsibility for the murders. But but people ask me, do I think she did it? And I do, but I also think she was not in her right mind.
It was not like her. It was very much
Right.
like an influenced act, is kind of
Like a disassociative, like another theory I have is like a splinter personality.
okay.
I do feel like that there was sexual abuse. So when you have that kind of trauma in her family, which of course back in 1892 that would not be recorded, but when you have that, almost like a break in your personality, dissociative
Yeah.
disorder. Uh, there is an entity at the house that is not Lizzie, but she sort of takes the role of Lizzie, and I call her Crazy Lizzie. It's almost like a splinter personality that psychically
Oh,
imprinted itself into the house. And
wow.
it's still there. It's still there. And Crazy Lizzie is crazy. So
Yeah.
it's something that kind of assumes the role of Lizzie Borden. So long story short, it was beneficial. It was healing for me to go back. But I also think that things are different since with the new owners. When I walked into the room where Andrew Borden was killed, there's a couch, and that's where I channeled Eliza Borden, and actually going back to the location and actually remembering the spots in the house where I filmed the show and had such a profound experience was weird, and it also healing as well.
That's amazing. It's so funny because you never picture the words beautiful and terrifying in the
Yeah,
same sentence, but I see 100% what you mean. I mean, that's it has to be very cathartic and very just kind of like a breath of fresh air, but at the same time I can see how it would be somber and bittersweet. There was and I think it was you, just forgive me because I've had a couple of interviews. There was a was it part of your team that had spotted a gentleman with a very scary smile in the after the basement incident?
yeah. So with that, so just from between you and me, I don't know how new you are into the paranormal field, but when you so my whole gist of Fueled by Fear is not to give negative energies energy.
Okay.
Um, or so when you talk about it, you almost give it energy.
Understood.
Um,
Yep.
Yeah, so that's something that's taken me years and years and years to understand. So even by talking about it in my home where I feel safe, it can give it energy.
Okay.
But yeah, so one of my students who's a gifted medium as well, and I work with every person in my group has a different kind of gift. With this student, she is, I would say, more clairvoyant. So she's able to see things that other people can't see, and I identify as a clairvoyant as well, although your abilities kind of shift as you progress as a medium. So she saw what looked like I mean, I would say probably based on her description, I would probably say it was the smiling man. It's not. So I think people at that house specifically are looking for original ghosts, the ghosts that actually belong in the house, and they are there, but there's another energy that kind of dominates the other spirits, and I think it's non-human.
Mhm.
It could be, it's something that assumes the role of Andrew Borden as well. So this man that she saw assumes the role of Andrew Borden, who was Lizzie's father.
Okay. Yeah, I guess where my curiosity with that was through all of my interviews. And honestly, one of the biggest fuels behind starting this podcast is I have had experiences, and I don't know what to I honestly don't give myself a label because I don't know what I am or why things happen the way that they do. And so I want to learn, and I've been trying to interview and kind of educate. It's, it's a learning experience for me, but also for people like me or people out there who are interested in the paranormal and the supernatural. I'm trying to bring awareness and say, hey, this stuff is very real, don't be stupid about it, and
Right.
bring that light to it and say these things are out there, and don't just kind of run into somewhere like the Lizzie Borden house and think that you can just start asking questions and dabbling. And so my hope from starting this podcast is not only to educate myself and learn and open my horizons and find resources, but also to help people who are listeners, you know be smarter and open it up to a younger generation that is more educated about this field. And so when I heard that, one of the things that I've kind of learned through this podcast and having demonologists and investigators, there's a common theme that I'm hearing that we have the D word, right? And then we
Right.
have spirits and we have residual energy. I'm realizing that it's not just simple as, you have heaven and hell and then spirits. And I guess in my head, from what I had always been taught my whole life, especially because I feel like we're born into our religion, is, depending on what your beliefs are, for me, it was heaven, hell, angels, and the D word. And
Right.
so I didn't know that there could be things that were not the D word, but were evil entities, I guess. So I just wanted to kind of pick your brain about that and see, you know, what would you like, how do you classify these things, and in your world and in your belief system, what is what, and kind of help me unpack and understand that, maybe some listeners that are listening.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, this is years and years of research, and it's not just me, but other people in the field. So it's part of the development. So I'm glad that you are talking about this, because it's something that, you're right, the younger generation. I came in without a mentor, having these gifts. It sounds like that you're definitely empathic, and an empath is where you feel other people's emotions, and that will lead you to other portions of your gift that will be revealed in the future. The other non-human entities, and when you say non-human, people automatically think the D word, but from my experience, a lot of the non-human energies that I've encountered out in the field are elemental energies. Elementals are from the earth, but they're, I would say, more Native American spirits, and that makes complete sense, because this is right outside of the Bridgewater Triangle, this part of Fall River. So there's a lot of Native American energy in that area specifically. You also have King Philip's War, which was a Native American massacre that happened in the 1600s that I feel is still lingering on the land. They also found a skeletal remains of what they think was a sachem, a Native American sachem, right down the
Wow.
street from where the murders took place. So when so the other energies, I really feel could be Native American in nature.
Okay.
And so we have in New England, we have what we call little imps, like little puckwudgies, they're called, and they're neither good nor bad, but they can lure you to your death. You don't want to have a puckwudgie pet. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
no, it sounded very cute. It kind of sounded like a mogwai, or
yeah, like a
something
little gremlin.
cutesy, and then
Yeah,
you're like, oh, they just lower you to your death. No big deal.
exactly. And I have people that are really fascinated with them. I'm like, keep your distance. But what's the difference between elemental energies and other darker entities? Is that you want to give an offering of some sort. So with puckwudgies, people grow like a straw, like a berry bush next to their home, almost giving them an offering.
Okay.
You also have, with some Native American spirits, you want to offer tobacco. So it's a different approach to elemental energies, as opposed to using the worst thing you can do is kind of walk in with a crucifix and and try to do an exorcism, because it's going to anger the Native American energies. So you
Okay.
have that. You also have spirits that have a lot of guilt that kind of manifest as monsters. And
Okay.
I do a lecture called Monsters of the Paranormal, and really my monsters are a lot of it are spirits that have guilt, like Andrew Borden, maybe that gentleman that my students saw with the grin, and was Andrew Borden a manifestation of Andrew Borden? I don't personally think it was, but I think that it's assuming that role. Then you have what I feel is the most common. They're called thought forms, and thought forms are when you give tours, or when you investigate a location over and over and over again, it generates something outside of you. It manifests, and it almost creates a monster. And so you can call it a thought form, you can call it an egregore. I see a lot of that in Salem, Massachusetts, which is where I've given tours for many years. But
Yeah.
you're going to have a thought form at the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, because people come in with intentions to solve the murder, to demonize Andrew Borden. So they're going
Yeah.
to maybe create a manifestation that looks like Andrew Borden, or assumes the role of Andrew Borden. So I would say, from my personal experience, what people view as the D word probably would be more egregores, thought forms that are really, really angry. So this kind of like this ball of energy that will scratch you, do all sorts of things to you, can even attach to you.
Wow. I've never even heard some of these terms. And it's funny because, like I said, so since I was a little girl, and I've said this on previous podcast episodes, I love the word weird. I have been a weirdo my whole life. I was the little girl that when my friends were playing Polly Pockets, I was there with Freddie and Jason. I was having battle royales, on my front step. So, I always loved and was intrigued with the supernatural and horror and just like learning about it. And so to hear these like new terms, it's just very interesting because I've always been the person to sit at a campfire and be like, okay, what crazy experiences have you had? And one of my really good friends, he has a Spanish background. His mother, and please forgive me because I'm not too good with the terminology, but she kind of worked in like I think it's Brujera. I don't know how to say it. It's like Brujera, and I'm like I don't want to butcher it, but he was telling me a story about her with her mother, and he said his grandmother and his grandfather, they had something called it was like their angry room. And if they would ever have a spat or they would come home and they would be in a mood to kind of prevent fighting, you go to kind of like the emotional like angry room, you let it out, and then you walk out and you start fresh. And what they didn't realize over time was that his grandmother was very sensitive and she didn't realize they were creating almost like this poltergeist.
Yeah.
And this was one of the first stories that I had ever heard about like that energy manifestation of kind of constantly leaving this room, just dropping off your negative baggage and then leaving it behind. And they would feel a million times better, but weren't realizing that they were creating like almost like a hoarding situation of negative energy. And it turned into a full blown poltergeist, so to say, or, maybe it's called something else, but is that like the same thing?
It's the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. So when you have an argument in a room and you walk and you can feel the room feels heavy, that's what that is. So,
Okay.
but imagine having a room dedicated to that, and you have that really like the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, or like some of these haunted locations where you go and you have some people that have extreme fear, and it almost creates something. And I will say that, and this is in my book, Fueled by Fear, but it's almost like these manifestations actually feed off of emotion, extreme
Yeah.
emotion. And I mean, obviously, a murder, like a really horrific murder, like what happened in 1882, is going to leave a scar. It may have even created the initial energy or thought form, or tulpa, but then it's been fed and fed over the years, and now it's a full blown monster.
Yeah. And that makes so much more sense because I always wondered, I did an episode on the Villisca Axe murders. And that's another one that people have been scratched or they've been and they ultimately, like you said, go to the D word. But you can't help but think, now knowing this, like how many hauntings and these energies that people claim to either be the D word or ghosts are truly not just layers and layers of years of people coming in and out of here and kind of dropping off their energy. So that's really neat to learn. So I thank you for that because like I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so the when we had the Spirit Squad weekend, so we actually held it at the Edgewood Manor, and which is a beautifully, it's an old, dates back to the early 1900s. It was actually a place where nuns lived for a while, so it had a pretty positive energy. But it's also haunted, but it's never been investigated before. So it was a great location for my students to connect with, I guess, the actual house spirits, but then also juxtapose it with a location like the Lizzie Borden house that has been investigated a lot, and see how it's different.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's definitely, as as a clairvoyant, as someone that investigates both kinds of locations, it's really hard to kind of get through the baggage and the manifestation that are around you at a place like the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, to the original ghosts or the spirits that actually are disembodied souls that I feel that are, some of them are stuck there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's super fascinating, and it's a lot of layers to it. But I do, as an instructor for up and coming, empaths, clairvoyance, it's really important for me to show them the different locations so they can feel the energy and the difference in the energy, and how to investigate at a place like the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast versus a location like the Edgewood Manor that has not been investigated.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice with that Edgewood Manor because they can go in kind of with a clean slate. Because like you said, I mean, there's been places that I've been to, like for my bachelorette, all my girls were like, all right, we're taking Morgan to Penn Asylum. And, it was funny because I had a dream, and I said to my husband, because they were keeping a secret, I said, they're not taking me to Penn Asylum, are they? And he was like looking at me, and he like didn't want to break it, but I could tell it was like right on his lips, like, who told you? And I was like, I had a dream that I was walking down one of like the cell hallways, and I was like, I feel like this is where they're taking me. And so we pulled up, my stomach kind of just did this like backflip. And I was like standing there, and I did kind of go into that with a little bit of fear because I was like, there was a lot going on, and you could feel it. Like it was just one of those things where I felt like if I took a knife, I could cut straight through it. And I almost felt like, things like that would happen to me often. And I was like, was it was this something like trying to warn me? Was this something kind of saying, hey, like just be careful kind of going into this? Because I don't know, are you familiar with Penn Asylum?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Another location that I stay away from. I mean, I really recommend, if you're getting a psychic red flag from the location, to wait until you're ready to go in. And I think that's what my book Fueled by Fear really is about. I had 3 locations that I swore I would never go to, and I did, but I did it with a team where I felt safe with the team, and I was in the right place in the right frame of mind. And the 3 places were the Conjuring House, which I swore I would never go to, Hinsdale House in New York, and the Sally House in Kansas. And Pennhurst is another location, but for me, it's more about kind of like the same issues with Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. It's been investigated, so I feel like it's more the baggage, and and you get the children pretend that they're pretending to be children, but they're not children.
Yeah.
Something else pretending to be a little girl, and to me that breaks my heart because it's so hard to differentiate between an actual child spirit and an energy pretending to be a child.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it was definitely one of those things where, pulling up, it was like I already had that like in my head, just that there was a little bit of fear there where I was like, oh man, like I feel like I don't do well with very heavy locations.
Yeah.
And so, it kind of where I was going with that was, with the Edgemore, the
Edgewood.
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 Sorry, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll get it down. I'm like, there's a lot of places. But with the Edgewood, it's nice that they could kind of walk into that with a clean slate and not have the fear and just kind of see what comes naturally. And so I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about the Spirit Squad, because I mean, this sounds really awesome. How did this get started? Who typically comes to you? Like, how does this all work? Just sounds really neat.
So Spirit Squad is a group of, so we have classes online. So we have 5 classes for each sequence of Spirit Squad. So we just finished up Spirit Squad 2. These are empaths and mediums that are kind of like you. They know they have some sort of gift, and they want to fine tune those gifts. And so it's a community of people like you gathered together. We share information. I'm kind of the facilitator, and I act as their mentor. But it really is the group and the power of the group together. And what's happened is, so we meet 5 times, so like once every week. We have a Facebook group where we kind of share notes. We go through the different just kind of like what we're talking about now, kind of like we talk about like the different types of hauntings. We talk about different ways that what I use that works for me to communicate with spirit, like the Estes method or the Gonsfeld method, which is where you wear the blindfold and the white noise, or other devices. Like I'm a big dowsing rod. I use dowsing rods a lot. So we go through the different techniques, and then we have a kind of like a field trip at the end where the group goes and they do a psychic sweep of a location, and I kind of already know what they're supposed to pick up, but they don't, so they go in cold, which is what you're supposed to do if you're a medium. And so they go in and they read it and they nail it. So it's just for me, the most important thing about Spirit Squad is it's a safe environment for uh, people who have abilities to fine tune those abilities and to work together as a group. And you'll find that when you have mediums together, it amplifies the gifts. So if you come in with just as an empath, or if you come in as a clairvoyant, other things are going to shift with the group. So you're going to have abilities. For me, working with Spirit Squad, I've never had the clair where you can smell or taste, and with this group, I do. And so other abilities kind of amplify and intensify, and you'll see the power of positive energy together. And also the fact that you can go to a location. If you go in by yourself, you'll have a horrific experience, but when you go in with a group, it's actually can be turned into a positive experience.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I could see how that would be because it's very empowering. And I mean, they always say there's power in numbers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's amazing. And it sounds like something that's truly needed because one thing I will say that I think has kind of, I mean, I'm 28. So it's been a very long journey to kind of get to this point where I was like, you know what? I'm gonna tear the robe off and I'm just gonna be who I am and like figure it out and start asking these questions and put myself out there on a public forum and just not care because there's a lot of stigmas, there's a lot of
Oh,
judgment, when
yeah.
it comes to mediumship, psychic abilities, and especially the supernatural just in general. And I think that when you start to embrace that weird, this is probably the most happiest, the most liberated that I can personally say I've ever felt. So to give people like that a group where they can be safe and they can, like you said, fine tune and just be who they need to be without judgment or fear or rejection, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. That's amazing. And the world needs a lot more of that.
It really is, and so I travel all over the country. I lecture a lot of paranormal conventions, and it's weird. Everywhere I go, I find a Spirit Squad member. So I'll have a group of like 1,000 people, and that one person, I can see them in the room or feel them in the room. They kind of emerge. So I have the people that are in part of Spirit Squad. Is that one person in the audience that just needs it? It's almost like that they're called to me, and so that's what it is. So it's me looking for people like yourself or like other people throughout the country who need this, who need a safe environment where they can feel where they're not judged. And there's all different levels of mediums in the group, and there's all different skill sets. I do like to pair up sort of the more, the ones that have a lot of experience with the younger group, because I feel like that mentorship is really needed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is beautiful, and it's a lovely group. When you actually when you get outside of the Spirit Squad bubble and you actually do like look on social media, and there are people like, I don't believe in mediums, and I'm like, I I want to respond to those people, but really I'm like, my purpose is to help the younger generation to accept what I couldn't accept most of my life.
Yeah.
And I always say I came out of the crystal closet, but and I did. I mean, that's what it, because I was a journalist. I mean, I was very well respected, but I will tell you, I've always used my gifts no matter what I did. So when I was a journalist, I would use it to find information. And like, how did you find that out? I'm like, oh, just, like I really dug deep to find that, but really a lot of it was just claircognizance.
Yeah. That's honestly it just hits the nail on the head and that's so perfect the way that you said it because I just feel like I've said it a lot on this podcast is I'm like I feel like I finally have emerged from my spiritual closet. Like I'm like this is, and it's funny because I stayed so quiet about it, and really only like 4 or 5 people in my close circle. And I remember being really nervous, especially when I found my husband and I was like, okay, this is the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. Now, how do I tell him that I have these experiences? Like, so
Yeah.
I was, it's hard because people, there's a lot of scrutiny, and there is a lot of just there are naysayers. And I mean, with anything in life, you're going to have naysayers and you're going to have skepticism, but to own who you are and to be that boldly and just kind of say, okay, you know what, I have to start just trusting that this is my purpose and this is my path that I'm meant to walk. I never understood what an amazing feeling that is until I started doing it. And like I said, like I don't have a label for myself because I don't know, I truly don't know how to define myself because the things that happen are so all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think that I kept jumping back from, I would start to kind of advance, and then it was like something would happen, it would scare me, and then I'd like be like, all right, we're gonna close that door. So it's been a learning curve. So it's so refreshing to meet somebody like you who definitely radiates just very like soothing, accepting energy, and you're creating things for the younger generation so that they don't have to kind of live the way that you and I have, because it can be really isolating. And obviously that isolation leads to other things.
Yeah, and just to and I share this because I feel like it helps other people. So I've had this gift my whole life. So what I did is I used alcohol to drink away the ghost. And so I was, I've been sober for 13 years. So when I got sober, that's when I started doing the work. That's when I started to accept who I was. I'm like, part of recovery really is acceptance and kind of like, you know what, I can't drink away the ghost anymore. It actually not only did it it didn't work, but it actually amplified things when I was drinking. So when I got sober and things were still happening, I'm like, I just gotta accept it. And it took me, many years, a lot of mistakes along the way to get where I'm at now. I was a journalist, so like I was so worried about my credibility being ruined by coming out of the crystal closet, and and even up to the point. So when I was brought on to Curse of Lizzie Borden, I was actually on the show to be a historian and to be a family member talking about what I think is a bloodline curse. But I started to channel, and the producers were like, "Wait a minute, you can channel?" I'm like, "Yes," and I was with Dave Schrader, and I felt really safe with him, and I'm like, this is going to happen. So it shifted right there on that couch, and since then, I publicly have come up. I have been open about it with my friends and with the local paranormal community for many years, but I just didn't want to go on a television show with it because I was worried that my credibility would be shot. And I will say it has shifted. You have the people that were really much like strong supporters based on my historical research and in my books, kind of because they don't believe in psychics. They kind of shut the door on me, but that's okay. I mean, I'm okay with it. I feel that I had to do it, and I felt like I've been vetted by the best of the best. So I worked with Chris Fleming, and I worked with some of the, I would say to me, the most respected mediums in the field, and I did before Curse of Lizzie Borden, but it's just like I've proven myself over and over again.
Yeah.
I have no energy to prove myself anymore. What I do is I surround myself by people like Spirit Squad, where I can help them, basically be the people that they're supposed to be.
Yeah, I love that. And congratulations, seriously, on 13 years of sobriety, because I'm the daughter of an addict. So, I know how hard that is, and I know that
Yeah.
it's not a destination, it's a constant lifelong journey. So, I mean, kudos to you. That is amazing. And to turn, this into, this beautiful success story and helping other people find their purpose and embrace it is just absolutely beautiful. So seriously, like I am super proud of you, and that's just such an amazing thing. And I'm excited to have you on here because I think these are the things that listeners need to hear. This is the education part that I think is going to change lives. And I'm hoping it'll change lives when people, are tuning in. One of the other things that I kind of wanted to touch on is I actually had learned more about you through the House in Between too.
Yeah.
I had talked to John Bullard and I had him on here. But it was funny because during COVID, that was when Tiger King kind of became the last resort. You're like, what is happening? Like there's literally nothing else on TV. And I was like, oh, I need like a good, like something spooky to come out. Like I was like, I want to do some research. And then boom, my prayers were answered. The House in Between, the first one came out. And we watched that, and it was not what I expected, but pleasantly, it was
Right.
very educating, and it was informative. And then the House in Between 2 came out, and I was like, oh, what a treat. So you were on the House in Between 2. What was that like?
It was amazing. So I had already filmed Curse of Lizzie Borden. So at this point I already had kind of came out of with my abilities publicly. So I did a radio show called Paranormal Rewind. I interviewed Vera and Kendall, who are the producers of House in Between 2. I was talking to them about so they did the Conjuring House documentary, so I was interviewing them for that, and I read the property. I was kind of telling them what I was picking up from the house, and they were just kind of blown away by me. So they're like, "Hey, listen, we're working on another project. We can't tell you what it is, but we're going. We want you to be on this documentary." And having seen their work with the Sleepless Unrest, it was called. Having seen their work, I'm like, you know what? I'll do it. And they're like, will you go on as a medium? And I'm like, yes, I'll do it, because I feel like that what you have to. So I like to, if I go in as a medium, I like to not know where I'm going. I think it's really important to kind of go in with fresh eyes. And sometimes they'll literally put you in a blindfold, and they'll lead you to a location, so you can't have that preliminary research where you kind of dig for the ghosts.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know where I was going to be, and I didn't even think that they were going to do a House in Between 2. I didn't even know that. And to be honest with you, I didn't even the first one, I didn't watch it, so I didn't really know what to expect or where I was going. I actually thought they were wanting me to be a part of another one on the Conjuring House. I just knew that the group that produced the Sleepless Unrest were just really good people, and they were great filmmakers. So I did know that I was going to be working with another medium, and they brought me to Mississippi, and I still don't even know what part. I forget what part of Mississippi, but I flew in. I had a blindfold on going to the location, so I wouldn't be skewed by what I picked up on. I pull out, and then so Steve from Ghost Hunters was there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Steve from Ghost Hunters. And by the way, he is so nice. But he also, like, before I came on, so I use tools out in the field. So I'll use dowsing rods or Estes method or
What's
other
your
things.
favorite method? I wanted to ask that before, because I know you said you do like the dowsing rods, but is that like your method, like the one that you would prefer? Like, what's your favorite?
I need something to validate me, especially when I'm like first at a location, because like you'll have a psychic mediums, they'll bring you in and they want you just to read the property. It switches. I love the Estes method, but it doesn't translate necessarily well on television. It's just good to kind of feel out the energies with the Estes method. I've been doing the Gone spell method, which is where you have a blindfold, you have a white noise, and then you're supposed to have like ping pong balls and like a red light to kind of stimulate your brain, I guess. But I don't need that to kind of connect. I've been doing that a lot lately, and to me that's super powerful. But I always use my dowsing rods. My dowsing rods are kind of my babies, especially when I'm out I'm giving tours or at a location where I just need yes or no confirmations, I use the dowsing rods also to direct me where to go. They're
Okay.
almost like an extension of my energy, of my abilities. So anyway, I get out of the car, and Steve is like, "All right, Sam." And the thing is, I didn't know Steve, but we have a lot of mutual friends, and
Okay.
I've talked to him on radio shows and stuff before, and now I consider him a good friend because he was great. He's like, all right, so a lot of our viewers, this is, and he kind of, like he said to you, like you said, it was educational, so it's
Yeah.
really important for him. He's like, a lot of our viewers don't believe in psychics, and so what I want you to do is to do your thing, but not use tools like dowsing rods or like the Estes method. I want you to go and read the land. And like, I've never done that before. I just go and you like read the land. I'm like, okay. So I walk into the house, and so I meet Alice, and she is absolutely lovely. I love this woman. There was an older man that said, basically was telling me to get out. Like he was like, get out, get out. You know, this is my land. This is my land. And then we walk through the house, and I do really, without using my dowsing rods, I do very well reading the locations that had the most energy. Which is, there was one room where Alice had that initial encounter that continues to haunt her. And I will say this: so when I met Alice for the first time, we were just like soul connection. I love that woman, and I immediately loved
Oh.
her. I'm there with no tools, and I walk in the backyard, and so they're like, you can't use anything, you can't use any dowsing rods, no tools whatsoever. I'm like, all right, so I'm going to ask the animals on the property to give me validation. And so we're walking around, and I pick up what I pick up. And you know what aired on the show versus what, there was so much more to my walkthrough. This always happens, but I am really grateful for how it turned out. I think it turned out fantastic. But so there's a part where I'm with Alice, and I'm like, all right, animals, like, respond to me, is what I'm saying, is it true? And you can hear the birds kind of squawking in the background, like they were validating me, like, yes, it's true. And Alice's chin just dropped.
She's like, Snow White, is that you?
Yeah.
You got all the animal friends. I
Yeah,
love that though. That's so neat.
yeah. And so they put me out in a tent in the backyard. There was like an isolation tent. So I was out there for many, many hours, and probably one of the most haunted land locations I've ever been to. So I was hearing all sorts of things around me. And then I'm brought in, and I meet the other medium, Jill, for the first time. And the thing is, we really connected on a really deep level. Pretty quickly, and so we were able to validate each other. So when I'm telling what I picked up, and I'll tell you, when you're on a show, on a documentary, and you have no way to validate yourself, you feel really raw. Like, you're almost like, I'm going to mess up, I'm going to say something wrong. And when she was able to validate what I picked up, I mean, I'm still getting emotional about this because it felt, it was scary. It was scary. It was like, I'm gonna make a like an ass out of myself. But also too, the emotion was not just that I got it right, but also too that what I picked up was so horrific. It was
Yeah.
a lynching, and so when you have something as horrific as that, and seeing that and reliving that, that was emotional too. So when you see me get emotional, that's real. Like, that's legit emotion that I felt. But super grateful that I was able to work with Jill and work with Steve and work with the team and meet Alice for the first time. Oddly, like, I was never in the same room with with John and the other investigator was Brad. But I mean, I felt their energy there. And even when I was watching the documentary, I can, sorry, part of me is like, so for example, there's a part where the cat is like digging in the ground.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, like, you need to dig, because the spirits were telling me to dig. And that's the spot where I wanted them to dig.
That's I'm telling. So you are also. We have to add animal whisperer to your roster
Yeah,
here.
yeah, because that's all I had. I'm like, all right, animal friends, you know.
But that's really neat how you like, but that's the cool part is like you went in totally raw and you were
Yeah.
able to pull from the environment around you to help you use like as tools. So I think that's like profound. That is amazing.
and
That is
and
really
and that,
cool.
like, and also the not relying on what you normally use, like dowsing rods or other tools that you, I mean, even I would have loved just a pendulum, you know, like
Yeah,
just like a little a
something.
pendulum, just for some
You're
validation.
like,
And
throw
that,
me a bone, guys. Come on.
and, and you'll see me, like, even the part where I'm like, okay, birds, like, you know, if I'm telling the truth, like, they're animals, if I'm responding, and they responded, I'm almost kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do, you know. and
Yeah.
and I but I did it, and I'm really proud of myself. And I will say, some people that are more advanced, they can actually go, and they can go with a blindfold and read the energy. And well, I mean, obviously I can do it, but I had to use other tools to be able to tap into the energy. I almost wish I would have walked the property with a blindfold on, because I really felt like I would have probably picked up the energy stronger without a blindfold. But whatever happened, whatever you see on the House of Between Two, it was meant to be. And this was right before Curse of Lizzie Borden came out. So when I filmed it, I didn't they didn't the people on the show really didn't know me as a medium. They knew me as a historian. They knew me as someone I could go to when it came to Salem, Massachusetts. So people were able to see me for the first time as a medium. But at this point, I had already filmed 3 shows as a medium. So I had already, every show that I got was, I would say I got better, because I like being a medium, like, at an event versus being a medium on television is 2 different experiences. It's like,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, it's very different. And when I say that, it's because you have a cameras rolling and you're worried about messing up. Really,
Yeah.
there's a lot of self doubt when you have a camera rolling.
That's like honestly one of the worst things. I will say, like, when people like will ask me, like my close friends are like, how did you know that? Or like they'll like kind of like, I'm like, listen, I'm gonna tell you right off the bat, like like there's certain things that come through, and my biggest, I want to say, flaw is like I'll know things, and like you said, the validation is amazing because when you're initially trying to tell somebody something, like even last night, my friend Megan was on, and we're like relatively new friends. So like we've done things together, we've had fitness classes together, but I don't know anything kind of deeper than that. And it's almost like the only way that I can describe it, and I was kind of trying to tell her, is it's like an itch that you have to scratch. And like I'm sitting there and it's this person that's constantly like, I'm like, she's like, just tell her that it's Pam. Just tell her that it's Pam. And I'm like, I don't like, what if you're not the person for her? And like, I don't know. So I was like, I always like doubt. And I'm like, maybe I should just say anything at all. And I'm like sitting there, but then it's like the more that I try and like, I'm like, please quiet down, like pipe down. Like, I don't want to say anything. It like just gets louder and louder. But that self-doubt is like, I have to just like, I'm like, what if this isn't the right thing? And I'm constantly like second guessing. It's the worst. And so like I 100% relate to that, like nervousness, and that I feel like it can be anxiety inducing sometimes.
It really is. I mean, like, you know, yes, I have to realize that I'm right. You know, I
Yeah,
just I went what I and I tell this to my students with Spirit Squad. I'm like, listen, just say it. Just, you're in a safe environment. Just say it. There's no wrong answers. But when you have a camera rolling, it's a whole other
that's a
level.
lot of
Uh,
pressure.
yeah, a lot of pressure, and you're like, and if you just say it and it's completely wrong, then it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, they're like fake, shun, shun, shun,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh no. But yes, yeah, so I literally give you kudos because I can't, I hope, like, I don't want to sound like I'm making it like about me. It's just you're saying things that are like very relatable, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it makes my heart kind of pound because I can only imagine, like you said, to have a camera in your face and then to kind of have stuff like that coming through, and you're like, I know I'm supposed to kind of read the land and put this out there, but like you're right, if you say something wrong, I mean there's so much scrutiny and judgment behind things that like people are quick to to jump. So I mean, but you're amazing, and I thought that was so cool that the house in between two really was. I told John Bullard, I'm like watching it. When I finished the first one, I was like, I have so many questions. Like I was like, I wish I could just like send you a list of my questions and you could answer them because I just it was so amazing to see these very intelligent I can't even talk this much intelligent behavior, I guess is what I want to say. And then it was like it ended, and I'm like, okay, but we want more. Like, I'm like, what? Like, I have lots of questions. So when the second one came out, and you were there, and like there was a lot. I feel like there was a lot more kind of answers and closure. I know that it's still way ongoing and there's a lot
Yeah.
to kind of unpack there, but I was like, wow, I was like, Sam is kicking ass. I'm like, this is awesome. So, it was really cool.
I will say, so there was much more. I mean, so that, and so we have the validation scene where I go in and I meet Jill, and the conversations that I had with Jill off camera, she she was the right person to work with, and it was just a wonderful team. Other things and we'll save it for maybe there'll be a house in between three.
I hope
Fingers
so.
crossed, because there was definitely more, and I'm actually grateful they didn't put that on the second one, because I feel like there's other layers of the onion that we need to explore.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I am right there with you. I said this to John last time. I was like, I am manifesting that a third one is coming out. I'm like, because again, like, even though the second one did give me like more closure and it had, I feel like some answers, it was enough to keep me satisfied for now. I'm like, for now. But I told him, I was like, I'm waiting. I was like, I just want you to know when you're out there in the universe doing your thing, I'm sitting at home and I'm like, all right, like I'm watching Instagram. Like, when are we doing this announcement? Because I know it's got to be right around the corner.
And the part for me, out of all the different scenes in House in Between Two, the one that I love the most was at the very end when Alice actually stays in the house. And to me, like that, I mean, even thinking about it, it's just super beautiful, because I understand how she was terrified. She really was terrified. And also, I this woman, when you meet her, you just fall in love with her. You love Alice, and I still do. And we're friends on social media, and it's just like, I love this woman, and I want her to be able to sleep in her house. And so when she was able to do it at the very end, I guess I shouldn't give it away, but that
It's all
part
right.
was
We
just.
can always put like a little spoiler alert, but it's totally fine because, like, I mean, that was what I was like rooting for, is just because I don't know her, but just seeing her in the like, she just seems like such a kind, just genuinely gentle person. And she's a retired psychiatric nurse. So,
Yeah,
and this was supposed to be her retirement home.
yeah.
And it's like, it's so sad because I'm like, I feel like you work your whole life, and especially in a field like that. I mean, healthcare that's an animal in itself. And to retire from a field like that, and then your house is not, you can't sleep there. I mean, that's so like, it's disheartening, it's discouraging. So, to see that, I mean, that's really awesome.
And I will say, like, the house itself is beautiful. It's a beautiful house. It's a beautifully active house. The land seems to go on forever in the back. So we were in the tent, and I will say, like, during the daytime, and I was in the tent as the night progressed. From daytime to nighttime is completely different experiences. So I did my walkthrough during the daytime, and when it shifts to night, it's like it gets scary. So I feel her. I feel the feeling of all, like, what's going to happen when it got dark.
Now, would you say the energy, this is one of the burning questions that I've had is, John had said that it shifts drastically, but I was wondering, like, since a lot of it does seem to be land based, is it scarier outside than it is inside, or would you say it kind of balances out and it just turns scary altogether inside and outside?
It's definitely scarier outside. And imagine being, I mean, like I was in that isolation tent for about 3 hours, and Kendall, the director, he was like, I wish I would have had a camera because I was like, I was hearing and feeling and seeing all sorts of things like during the time inside. They were filming Jill on the inside of the house. So when I went out in that isolation tent, I kept going peeking out because I heard something and I saw. I mean, I will save it for hopefully the third iteration. But I saw a few things that didn't make the second one. But yeah, I would say outside definitely.
Ooh, now like I'm getting juiced up. I'm ready. I'm like, this is just honestly, it's gonna be a hunger pain. I'm gonna be sitting here and I'm like, please just release the third one. But yeah, I mean, that's amazing. It's amazing. And it's just so I just think it's so much fun how much you have produced. Like, you're not only doing, TV and shows, but books, tons of books, awesome books. And now I wanted to ask you, have you lived in Boston or Massachusetts like your whole life?
So no, actually, so I grew up my dad was in the Navy, so I grew up in Florida, Pensacola, Florida. I moved here in the '90s, so I felt like I was called to New England, and the fact that my family lineage dates back to this area makes complete sense to me now. But so I've lived in this area for since the 1990s.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, that's why I was kind of asking. And then like another question that I had too was I have been kind of just doing my own like little research project on the side. And I've been wanting to get like more psychic mediums on here because I've been doing this research about kind of like how ethnicity and like culture kind of ties into people who are gifted. So do you mind me asking like your lineage, like what is your ethnicity? And do you believe that sometimes that may have something to do kind of like genes, like some people are like Italians are more prone to having brown eyes, dark hair, like that kind of thing, like something silly like that. But, do you think that that kind of ties into how people may be maybe more gifted or more open to things.
Yeah, so on my mom's side, so we always thought we were Native American to be honest with you. We didn't know where my mother's grandfather came from, and it turns out that so Charles Hughes is my grandfather's name. His father was originally from Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and we didn't know all this. So we thought we were Native American most of our life, and we are English. So that is all the ties to the Borden family is from my mom's father, my grandfather, and his father. On my biological father's side, Baltrusis actually is Lithuanian. So yeah, so Lithuanian is my other side, and yeah, they also are very spiritual as well. I would say like my family in Lithuania moved to Illinois, so I also have ties in Illinois too. And my great grandmother, super Catholic, super Catholic, but also she had things that I would say were kind of witchy, and what she did that were part of the culture.
Okay. Yeah, I always feel like I don't know, like one of my other theories too is I do feel like psychic gifts and like mediumship always tend to be a little bit more on the maternal side. Like, do you feel that?
Well, I mean, so it passed down through my mother, and so my mother, my sister Shannon, actually my niece Aubrey is gifted as well, and that kind of why I decided to go public with my gifts is really for my niece because she is doing what I did as a child and what my sister Shannon did as a child, and now some of my other family members like my sister Angie, and even my mother is starting to accept it, I guess, a little bit more that we have a gifted family. So yeah, it's definitely on my mother's side.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's so awesome to hear. So, I guess like my other question too is how did you like what were some of your first experiences with your gift? Like as early as you can remember, what were some of, oops, sorry, those are my dogs. What were like some of the first, you know, um situations or scenarios that you can kind of give to our listeners that kind of said, hey, something's going on.
Well, I was always a sensitive child. So my parents divorced, and so we lived in Chicago. Parents divorced. We moved back to Florida. My grandfather, who is one of my spirit guides, and who is my connector to the Borden family. His last name is Hughes. We actually stayed at his house, but this is after he passed. And I remember, and it turns out that I was sleeping in my grandfather's room. Like after, and I didn't realize it was his room. And so this is when I was around 7 or 8 years old, or actually, no, actually I was 6 years old. And I would get these really profound dreams, almost like a download from my grandfather. So and I hear that my grandfather, he, of course, was not public with his gifts, but very prophetic. He would always have like almost like prophecies. That he would tell his children, but also he was super religious too. So he, of course, wouldn't say, "Hey, I'm a psychic," but our whole family follows the sleeping medium, Casey, Edgar Casey, who, and so we all, I would say, similar to what he did, my grandfather did as well. So my first experience was seeing my grandfather on the corner of what was his bed, but waking up and having conversations with my grandfather. And I would describe him to my mother, and my mother's like, "That's your grandfather." And I never met him before. Well, I did when I was younger, but I didn't remember seeing him as at 1 or 2 years old. So it started from there, and I had friends. I actually had what I thought were actually kids. They were actually ghosts.
That's awesome though.
Yeah, and one of that. So the genie was so as a little girl, she actually came out like this weekend. She kind of let the group know who she was. But one of my childhood playmates was a ghost.
Oh my gosh, that's fabulous though. I love
Yeah.
that. Oh
And I
my
didn't know. I mean, my whole life, I'm like, oh, what? Like, my mom was like, "There's Sam. There's no genie." And they're like, and she actually, so there was a little girl who lived down the street. But she died. She actually died at a young age. And my niece Aubrey is doing the same thing. Her little ghost is, I think, Emily, and her ghost friend had hollowed out eyes. So I'm like, Aubrey, that's not good.
yeah.
If your ghost friend has hollowed out eyes, she's like, "Do you see her, Uncle Sam? Do you see her?" And I'm like, "I did see her, but I don't. I just with." So Aubrey kind of attracts darker energies, so I just wanted to make sure that she's safe. So we
Safe,
really work
yeah.
we work a lot with her with protections because she tends to bring in little ghost kids with hollowed out eyes.
That's like worse. That's, I don't know, like for me that would be like the worst thing to hear my child say, like to walk up to me and be like, "Hey mom, there's somebody with no eyes in the kitchen." I would be like, I'd be like, "Okay,
So
well, how do we deal with this now?"
around like eight or so, it actually got darker for me. So like I kind of similar to Aubrey, I had a visitation. It actually was a man wearing a hat with red glowing eyes, and kept like staring at me through our window. We had this really large like kind of open window that looked out to the woods, and I
Mm.
you know. And I was terrified. So I've slept with the light on most of my life after that because I really didn't want to, because I would sleep with the light off when I was a kid, but then just because I kept seeing dark, I would see more like monstrous things. So I put up, I would say, like paranormal blinders for
Yeah.
most of my teenage years, and I would still have experiences along the way, but I just was so terrified from that experience, that initial experience. And the thing is, my sister Angie, she remembers it too. So it's like, I mean, we're able to talk about it now, but we weren't able to talk about it as kids.
That, so honestly, that just made me feel so much better. Because like my family, like it's all fun and they love me dearly, but they always roast me because I am 28 years old and I am still afraid of the dark. And like my friends laugh at me, but it's true. They're like, "You are like the biggest scaredy cat when it comes to the dark." And I'm like, I like light. I picked the house that has like 5 or 6 windows in the living room. I like to have all my blinds open. I am very much I need to have light. I don't like the dark. I don't like sitting in a room that's very dark. Like, so it makes me feel better that you said that, because I'm like, okay, it's not just me. Because like I don't, I was like, I gotta at some point I gotta grow out of this. I'm like, this has just got to be just something that I just never phased out of. But I'm like, okay, maybe there's a rhyme or a reason to it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So I still sleep with the light on, but my book Fueled by Fear that just came out talks about a lot of the phobias and
I need
fear
to
of
get that.
clowns, fear of like mannequin dolls. I'm terrified of dolls in general. So a lot of strange phobias.
Well, and it's funny, like I definitely I'm definitely gonna order this as soon as we get off, because that honestly has been the biggest hurdle that I have faced in this journey. And so that's why I like getting educated and picking people's brains, because the one thing, I mean, I will say, it does take a lot to scare me. Like I have seen many different things. The one thing that I don't do well with, and that's why it freaked me out when you were talking about your niece, is I don't like things with no eyes. Black
Yeah,
eyes, no eyes. I don't do well with it. I
yeah,
had a very, very, very terrifying nightmare that I can still feel like it's real today, 28 something years later. Like the thing, when it finally revealed itself to me, like in my dream, I truly believe that it was some sort of attack, and I don't know what it was, but it was not good. It when it revealed itself to me, it was my mom. It was presenting itself as my mom, and she wasn't in my life at that point. And when I didn't believe it and I was challenging it and saying like, no, you're not, when it revealed itself, it was this nasty looking, I don't even know what to describe it as. It was just terrifying, and it had no eyes.
yeah.
That's the reason I can never watch the end of Jeepers Creepers. I can't do no eyes. So, just those two things that you said, I was like, okay. I'm like, maybe I have a reason here. There's a rhyme and a reason.
And, and the fact that like Aubrey, she doesn't watch scary movies, so she like we're our family. So my growing up, my mother like didn't let us actually watch scary movies. So she didn't get it from like a TV show or from a movie. She got it naturally, and that's the same with me as well. But yeah, when she said the hollowed out eyes, I was like, Aubrey, we need to talk. And she's 6 years. I mean, she's young. She's like, and the thing, it's also like too, like this is happening right around the time it happened to me. It happened to my sister, so it was around 6 years old.
Yeah. And hopefully, because I know you said it was later on when things started to kind of get dark for you. So
Yeah.
maybe for her it might be a little bit opposite. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it might be like dark, and then we'll kind of enter the light phase.
Well, I mean, so my sister actually is part of Spirit Squad. So, and the reason why she's
Oh,
part of
okay.
Spirit Squad is to educate herself to help my niece. And
Oh,
so a big part of Spirit Squad also is protection. And so she does a lot of protection with Aubrey. We have like we have crystals that she has a little a blessed necklace that she wears. So we definitely really and we also focus on grounding and shielding, which is a big part of psychic mediumship that I didn't really learn growing up. I didn't know how to really protect myself. So now I do, and so we passed it on to Aubrey, and hopefully she'll be able to not to be accepted for who she is and not have to live, like basically hide her gifts, which is what
yeah.
I had to do.
Yeah. And she's so lucky to have you, and especially her mom, for that, because now that you have this spirit squad, I mean, you're going to start her off on the right foot and make sure that she is confident and powerful and can embrace that. I just love that. That makes my heart so happy, just learning all of that, because, it gives me hope that we're going to have a younger generation that embodies that confidence and that powerful energy to help the people around them, but also come together and be those power in numbers. So that's fantastic. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I think the kind of like my last question, I always love asking this. What is, out of all the shows and like books and stuff that you've done, all of your journeys that you've been on, one favorite thing that like what is your absolute, top favorite either location, your favorite book that you've written, and then one place that you're like, it was the worst experience of my life, will never do that again and would not recommend it to anybody else, and then just a piece of advice to our listeners.
So I mean, as my passion really is Salem, Massachusetts. So the book that kind of changed my life was my book Ghost of Salem. That's my international bestseller. It's the one I'm known for. But it's also where I have a stalker in Salem, and that's one of those locations that is kind of like bittersweet for me as well. So Ghost to me, Salem will always be the place that I love, and also the place that I've had the most terrifying experiences in. But so I would say Ghost of Salem. I would say even, and as far as like locations, this past year I went to bucket list locations that I said I would never go to. I really love the Hensdale House, and I'm really grateful that I was able to go there. I do think it does call psychic mediums to the location, but I really would like to go back there. And another bucket list location that I visited that I absolutely loved was the Stanley Hotel, and I'm actually going back. My brother Justin just moved. Well, not just, he's been there for a couple of years, but moved to the Denver area. So going back to the Stanley Hotel, which to me is one of my all-time favorite haunted hotels, and that's the inspiration for the movie The Shining. Yeah, and then one location that I haven't been to. I actually went as a tour, but not as so I just kind of grazed it. I didn't go at someone that was into the paranormal, as the Queen Mary, and I've always that's another bucket list location that I would love to spend time on and investigate. A place that I don't want to go back to. That's actually really hard. I mean, I think that there's a lot of locations that have been that may have energies there that are negative. And really, and I hate to say this, but Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast. I mean, I really feel that with the new owners and the new the I don't want to go back. I don't want to go to, and even though I'm tied to the family, and I feel I've investigated that location a lot, I also feel that my work there is done, and it was good to kind of have some closure and to offer. I had a little crystal that I left at the house, offering up an apology to the family. And I care about the story, and I care about the stories told correctly. But I also feel like I've done my time, and I feel like I had a full circle with the Borden family. So that's probably the location that people ask me like all the time, like, hey, I'm going to stay there. What should I do? And I'm like, I'm probably not the right person to ask, because I had a pretty horrific experience there. but yeah, probably the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast.
Okay, that was a fantastic answer. Now, one piece of advice for the listeners, if you could give one.
So the piece that I would say slow and steady when it comes to tapping into your abilities. I think there's sort of this desire to kind of quickly, work on your abilities and fine tune it. Slow and steady wins the race. So things are going to unfold for you organically, and just kind of go with the flow, trust your instincts, and let it fold naturally. You can't force it. And also too, and this is something that I tell myself, is if you ever go in with my purpose is to help other people and to hopefully help the spirits that may be trapped here, or to give them a voice. But if you ever go in with greed or go in with wrong intentions, your gifts will completely shut down. So go in with good intentions and you'll have a positive outcome.
I love that. That's the perfect piece of advice. Well, I can't thank you enough. And you are always welcome here at the Ghoul Friend Hour. We'd love to have you on again, sometime in the near future. Anytime you want to come on and, talk about some projects, or if there's a house in between three, I'm going to snag you up and I'm going to be like, Sam, you got to come back on and you got to fill us in.
And there's so much more that I would love to talk about, and I feel like that they may be holding on to it for a third version. So we'll see. So definitely.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, like I said, you're always welcome. And we just can't thank you enough for your time tonight. I've just really enjoyed. I feel like I could talk to you for a million hours. You are such a fantastic soul, and I've really enjoyed having you on. So I have a little ritual that I say every time before I kind of close out my little Zoom. I always say, until next time, let's get weird. So if you don't mind joining me on the count of three, I'm going to say, until next time, let's get weird.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, are we gonna do it now?
Yes, we'll do it again. Ready?
Okay.
So until next time, let's
Let's
get
get weird.
weird.
Woo!
Thank you so much, Sam. And we'll talk to you soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourself and just stay beautifully blessed.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.